Welcome to Fireside Chat, a devotional that takes place in the Fireside Room at Falls City First United Methodist Church in Falls City, Nebraska. This devotional follows the Revised Common Lectionary, a 3-year devotional tool which gives 4 scriptures each week. If you read all 4 scriptures each week, over the course of the 3 years, you will have read a vast majority of the Bible. Each week we will read the scriptures, and Pastor will give his first thoughts upon reading the scriptures, as well as any other interesting information there is for the week. We thank you for joining us, and we hope you find something meaningful and powerful in today's devotion. Each week I read from the Common English Bible, a recent translation by multiple Protestant denominations, including the United Methodist Church. Today's devotion is for the second Sunday after Epiphany, January 16th, 2022. It's the second Sunday after Epiphany because technically last Sunday was the first Sunday after Epiphany, even though we have the special name for it of the Baptism of the Lord Sunday. It is the first Sunday after Epiphany. Epiphany would have been the Sunday before that, or in between the Sundays before that. So we have the second Sunday after Epiphany. This is the first Sunday where it's definitely going to be the color green. Up on the front. Green is the color for the seasons of what we call ordinary time. There are 2 seasons of ordinary time in the calendar. There's a season after Epiphany, which lasts from Epiphany Sunday through until the Sunday before Ash Wednesday. And on both ends of those, there's a potential for a white banner, a period of celebration up on the altar, like the Baptism of the Lord Sunday. And then the second period of ordinary time is called the season after Pentecost. And that goes from Pentecost Sunday, the Sunday after, right after Pentecost Sunday, all the way through until the Sunday right before the first Sunday of Advent. And again, on both ends of that, and I think maybe one in the middle, there's a chance for a celebration Sunday with the color white, if the pastor so chooses. I've said in the past few weeks that, right, purple or blue are colors of preparation. White is a color of celebration. Red is a color for the Spirit, we'll get to when we get to Pentecost. Green is basically a color of there's nothing special. It's a bad way of saying it, but I don't know of anything else, right? It's the color for when there's nothing else to be displayed. That's why we call it the period of ordinary time. And one of the things that I talked about in my newsletter to my church here at Falls City First United Methodist was as the colors change over to green and we change into ordinary time, it can sometimes feel ordinary. And sometimes it can be difficult to really come to church, really be fully present. It feels like, well, if I'm going to skip a week, that's the good week to sleep in, or that's the good week to go on vacation, or whatever it might be. And it's really, really important that we fight that urge as much as we possibly can. It's really important that we are fully present at worship every time we're at worship, whether we're at home worship or whether we're worshiping at a church wherever we are on vacation. It's not that you should never go on vacation, but wherever you are, you should be fully present in worship. And one way you can do that would be to develop some kind of routine that you do before worship to help you be present for worship. There are 7 Sundays, including this one and including the final one, between now and Ash Wednesday. 7 chances to try something to see if that really helps you center your mind to be fully present for worship, ready to hear God speak. Because God is speaking. Even if the color is green, even if it's ordinary time, God's still coming to worship. God is still speaking. Your pastor is still offering words, hoping that the Spirit would move within the words of the sermon, within the words of the songs, within the words of the prayers, that God would still be speaking to you. And it's important that you be present enough to hear God speak. So a lot of other denominations, besides United Methodists, have traditions where they are doing things before worship, individually, specifically to center themselves for worship. I talked this past Sunday about incense sometimes being in some of those traditions, where the priest or pastor will burn some incense on the way in to create a smell that reminds you that reminds your mind that you're in this space of worship, that God is present with you. We don't do any of that in the United Methodist Church, but it would be good, I think, for you to develop something that you do every week that would remind you that you're in worship, remind your brain right? That you're in worship and to be able to help you be fully present. And you've got 7 weeks here. It's a good opportunity to try some new things out if that has not been reality for you the entire time. The readings for the second Sunday after Epiphany, January 16th, are the Old Testament reading is Isaiah chapter 62, verses 1 through 5. The song reading is Psalm 36, verses 5 through 10. It's listed as United Methodist Hymnal number 771. Our epistle reading is 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 1 through 11. And our gospel reading is John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. Before I begin reading, I want to point out that oftentimes, particularly in ordinary time, but it can go throughout the entire year, oftentimes the lectionary readings have some sort of connecting theme, some sort of thing that keeps popping up throughout them that helps them to go together, particularly if you're reading all of them or multiples of them within the same worship service. They kind of are able to both lead into the same sermon, both go or all go into that same kind of message. And so as I read the lectionaries, I am kind of thinking ahead of like, okay, is there something between them? It's going to be something in the back of my head. I know that the gospel reading is the wedding at Cana. Oftentimes the gospel reading, dictates what other scriptures are picked. I don't know if this week is going to have that kind of connecting theme, but it is something I'm looking at as I go through. Let's read. From the book of Isaiah, chapter 62, verses 1 through 5. For Zion's sake, I won't keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake, I won't sit still until her righteousness shines out like a light, and her salvation blazes like a torch. Nations will see your righteousness, all kingdoms your glory. You will be called by a new name, which the Lord's mouth will determine. You will be splendid. You will be a splendid garland in the Lord's hands, a royal turban in the palm of God's hands. You will no longer be called abandoned, and your land will no longer be called deserted. Instead, you will be called, my delight is in her, and your land married. Because the Lord delights in you, and your land cared for once again. As a young man marries a young woman, so your sons will marry you. With the joy of a bridegroom because of his bride, so your God will rejoice because of you. So this chapter, this verse, I didn't see anything about the wedding at Cana, although there is, wedding theme. I guess there's that in there. But this verse is in the second part of Isaiah, the back half of Isaiah. Some scholars divide Isaiah into three. This would be in the third part of Isaiah. And this would be the part that most scholars believe was prophecy given to the people in exile. And this is a really hope-filled message, whereas a lot of the beginning is more of a coming doom-filled message given to the people back in the kingdom, the last days of the kingdom. And so we have a lot of hope in this passage, right? A lot of messages of, you will return and things will be back to where they were. But I do think it's important to note that what the prophecies are prophesying is not along the lines of, you will return to your greatness, right? You will return to the kingdom and all nations will bow before the kingdom of Israel. It's you'll have your lives back. Your sons will marry your daughters, and not hopefully within the same immediate family, but that will happen, and that you'll be joy-filled, you'll be celebrating back at home, and I think it's important that a lot of these prophecies they focus on that kind of smaller scale type things, and that seems to be what God is believing is the source of joy in life, is those smaller things, and not necessarily some of the more global things that we focus on and worry about and want to be the best at. Our song reading is from Psalm 36, verses 5 through 10. This is listed as a psalm for the music leader, a psalm of David. But your loyal love, Lord, extends to the skies. Your faithfulness reaches to the clouds. Your righteousness is like the strongest mountains. Your justice is like the deepest sea. Lord, you save both humans and animals. Your faithful love is priceless, God. Humanity finds refuge in the shadow of your wings. They feast on the bounty of your house. You let them drink. from your river of pure joy. Within you is the spring of life. In your light we see light. Extend your faithful love to those who know you. Extend your righteousness to those whose heart is right. Amen. This seems to be a psalm and a song of praise to God. It is a beautiful song of praise to God. I really do like it. It hits a spot for me, but I don't have necessarily any comment. Yeah, God is good all the time, and God is faithful to us. Good song. Good job, David. In between that reading and this one, I've been realized that I did not turn on the fire. I hadn't had the fire on because of the Christmas decorations around. I wanted to have the fire on today, and I didn't have it, so hopefully that is okay. Our epistle reading is from 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 1 through 11. This is Paul discussing the spiritual gifts to the church of Corinth. Brothers and sisters, I don't want you to be ignorant about spiritual gifts. You know that when you were Gentiles, you were often misled by false gods that can't even speak. So I want to make it clear to you that no one says Jesus is cursed when speaking by God's Spirit, and no one can say Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit. There are different spiritual gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are different ministries, but the same Lord. And there are different activities, but the same God produces all of them in everyone. The demonstration of the Spirit is given to each person for the common good. A word of wisdom is given by the Spirit to one person, a word of knowledge to another according to the same Spirit. Faith to still another by the same Spirit. Gifts of healing to another by the same Spirit. Performance of miracles to another. Prophecy to another. The ability to tell spirits apart to another. Different kinds of tongues to another. And the interpretation of tongues to another. All these things are produced by the one and same Spirit who gives what he wants to each person. I had three different things that popped out to me during that reading, but the main one I want to focus in on today, the one I think I was most led to, is there are different ministries in the same Lord. It's verse 5 in this book. I am a pastor in the United Methodist system. In the United Methodist system, we have currently an itinerant system, which means that we have a bishop, and that bishop sends the pastors, appoints the pastors to churches. The churches don't hire the pastors. The bishop and the conference sends pastors to the churches, which means that we move around a lot, and that we get to see a great many different places of worship, a great many different church buildings, a great many different people and styles of worship, and most importantly, we get to see a great many different traditions and a great many different ministries. And a lot of times we pastors, particularly in the age of the internet, we talk with each other a lot, and so some of those ministries are becoming more centralized, more common and spread out amongst the groups, because we talk to each other and we say, well, this worked and this didn't. But there's still a lot of times where there's traditions that one church has that the next church doesn't. I remember growing up, we always had the offering would take place after the sermon, and so in all the churches that I was in, the offering would take place after the sermon, and you would give the offering, and then as a response to the sermon, if you will. And then I got to my first church, where I was appointed to, and looked at their order of worship. I always like when I get to a new church to look at the order of worship and see what it is and see where it's there. There's no right order of worship or wrong order of worship. So I want to see where it's at and see if anything even needs changed. And lo and behold, there it is. They've got the offering before the sermon. I had never seen that before in my life. I kind of asked the leaders, like, is that what is that what you want? And they're like, well, that's how we've always done it. And they kind of had the thought, well, that's where it goes, right? Every church does that, and no, not every church does that. I think of things like mission dinners. I've had a church that did a garage sale every June. My understanding is this church does a garage sale most Junes. Another church held a potluck every first week for missions. The mission team would bring a whole bunch of food, and we'd have a potluck, and you had a free will donation for church members. And some people from outside the church would come on that first Sunday right after their church got out. They'd bolt over there to have our potluck and give to our mission, and that was how they gathered for missions. And each church does things differently, and I think that we have a tendency in a very real human nature to assume that the way we have done it for a while, if not for our entire lives, is the correct way to do it, the only possible way to do it. And there's some grieving if things look like they're just not going to continue, if we just can't do it anymore. And when I read this verse, that was what the kind of thing that popped to mind. There are different ministries, but the same Lord. And there are different activities, but the same God produces all of them in everyone. This devotional wouldn't have been possible, 10 years ago? Maybe that's even too long. Maybe 5 years ago? This devotional wouldn't have been possible. It wouldn't have been something that would have been able to be done. And yet it is. Go back 500 years. Right? None of us would have been here, right? We wouldn't have had the lights to turn on. The fireplace would have been, real wood. I would have had no turning it on or off in the middle of it, right? I've got to light the fire. None of this would have been here. And yet the same Spirit is present. The same Spirit was present 500 years ago. The same Spirit was present 10 years ago. The same Spirit will be present 10 years from now. And the Spirit gives to the church the gifts that are needed. And the Spirit gives to the church the motivation and the strength and the desire to do the things and the missions that are needed in that time. And sometimes those change. But it's still the same Spirit, it's still the same God, and it's still the same church. And we need to celebrate where the church is going. We may grieve where the church has been. And the losses that we can feel and we can sustain, whether it's from ministries or from attendance or from any of a number of other things. But we also should be celebrating where the church is going, because the Spirit will be there as well, and we need to be ready to listen to the Spirit guiding us in what we need and the direction we need to go when we get there. So after that nice long reading, we finally arrive at our gospel reading, the wedding at Cana, John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration. When the wine ran out, Jesus' mother said to him, "They don't have any wine." Jesus replied, "Woman, what does that have to do with me? My time has not yet come." His mother told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby were 6 stone water jars used for the Jewish cleansing ritual, each able to hold about 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." They filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Draw some from them and take it to the head waiter." They did. The head waiter tasted the water that had become wine. He didn't know where it came from, and the servants who had drawn water knew. The head waiter called the groom and said, "Everyone serves the good wine first. They bring out the second-rate wine only when the guests are drinking freely, but you kept the good wine until now." This was the first miraculous sign that Jesus did in Cana of Galilee. He revealed his glory, and the disciples believed in him. Lots of things come to mind when I read this story, but one of the things that comes to mind for me the most whenever I read this story is Mary. I really like to focus in on Mary and the words Jesus says to Mary. Let's go through that exchange again. When the wine ran out, Jesus' mother said to him, "They don't have any wine." What is Mary thinking here? She assumes, I think, that Jesus will do something about it. whether she, obviously we know from Luke chapter 1 that she knows Jesus is the Son of God. Does she think that Jesus will produce wine out of thin air? We don't know that for sure. Maybe she thought Jesus would go home and go get some of their wine and bring it back so that the family wouldn't be embarrassed. Because if the family ran out of wine in the middle of the wedding, that would be a huge embarrassment to that family. Maybe she'd do that. She knew that her son would have compassion. That's what she's anticipating, is her son will have compassion upon the people. She knows her son well enough for that somehow Jesus will find a way to make sure this family does not run out of wine in the middle of the wedding and suffer that giant embarrassment. But Jesus replies, what does that have to do with me? Jesus, this is not the Jesus of the rest of the Gospels, right? Jesus literally replies, that's not my problem. That's a weird Jesus. And it's explained a little bit that he replies, my time has not yet come. So certainly in Jesus' mind, he's not thinking about going to his house and getting the wine that they have and bringing it back. He's thinking creating wine, right? A miraculous event, a miraculous thing. Mary, I don't know what she's thinking, but that's definitely where Jesus is thinking. And Jesus is saying, like, it's not time yet. It's not time to do a miracle yet. I can't help them. And Mary turns around and basically ignores him. Mary assumes that even with that mindset, even knowing that, Jesus will still help the family, because she turns to the servants and says, do whatever he tells you to do. And then she walks away. She knows her son well enough. She knows the compassion he has for the world, hopefully the compassion she has helped to instill, that he won't leave them in the situation, that he's going to do something. And she walks away. And she allows Jesus to do a miracle in the background, where hopefully no one will know, or just the servants will know, right? Very few people will understand what just happened. And then he fills up the bins. Bins used for ritual washing, bins used to make things holy. Fills them up with water. The water turns to wine, not in the bins, but in the pitchers, as they're scooping. And they say it's the best wine that they've had during the entire party. Jesus doesn't just make wine, he makes really good quality wine. The best wine in the world. Even though he knew he was running a risk, because it wasn't time yet. He wasn't ready to have the crowds. He wasn't ready to have his ministry beginning. And yet this family is in need, and so he helps them. I think this story tells us so much about who Jesus is. It tells us that in Mary's assumptions about Jesus, where even when Jesus is saying, I'm not going to help them, she turns around and says, he's going to help them do what he says. Where she knows who he is, and then he winds up helping them. Even though he said, I can't run that risk, I can't do that, he still finds a way to help them with the minimal risk to his ministry and his ultimate goal possible. He tells us so much about who Jesus is, and the compassion he has on people, the compassion he has, the love he has for the individual, for the people there, and by extension, we assume the love and compassion and grace he has on each and every one of us. Thank you for watching this devotion all the way through to this point. My hope and my prayer is that you have gathered something from this, and that you have that God has spoken to you at some point during this. If God has spoken to you, if you have gotten something from this devotion, please do comment down below. It really does help this devotion be seen by as many people as possible. Please do react on Facebook or YouTube. Comment down below and let me know what spoke to you and what you love about this series. As always, thank you for watching, and may God be with you until we meet again. Amen.